Hi all, welcome to the very first episode of OUVC Failure and Success Stories podcast. You could meet me in our previous episode when actually the OUVC team was introduced. My name is Gergő Gulyás, just a little bit of a recap. And basically I am a so-called innovation expert. I would rather call myself an innovation junkie because I do a lot of things. I build accelerators, I work with hundreds of startups. I pretty much fit in the category of a serial entrepreneur as well. So, and most importantly, I am the head of operations and strategic partnerships at OUVC. So I have two lovely guests with me today. One is lovelier than the other one.
Fun fact, it's not me.
Anyway, just jokes aside. So yeah, you could guess that's going to be a funny podcast. We have like great sound effects as well. I'm going to reveal them later. So, but before I introduce them to you guys, I just want to talk a little bit about OUVC because, we just launched a few weeks ago and I think it is beneficial for you to know more about us. So, OUVC, it's a venture capital and venture studio that belongs to the University of Óbuda with an LP of the Széchenyi Capital Fund. We have 10 billion, let me just say it again, 10 billion Hungarian forint to invest in a 10-year period with ticket sizes ranging from 20 to 300 million Hungarian forints, which is decent, I would say.
Let's go for it. I would go for it.
Yeah, so absolutely. And so how we do this, what makes us special? So first of all, you're going to meet the team. We have a great team, international experts from the industry. So, not just from broker firms, but actual, people who build accelerators, work with startups and so on and so forth. And, we also have the university there because, we actually at a building of a university, if I'm not mistaken. So we are surrounded with very good people, huge amount of brain power, cutting edge tools. Óbuda University. I think I don't need to introduce it, but let me just do it anyway. So, it was established in 1879. Now it has 12,000 students, 7 faculties, 3 doctorate schools, an excellence center, and 8 research labs across Budapest and the rural areas of Hungary. So it is very, very international. I would like to highlight 2 things. So first of all, very international. So it has ties to 90 countries, 90. Actually, partnerships with 300 higher educational institutions, and it participates in 250 mobility programs. So very, very international. When it comes to innovation, that's the other thing that I would like to highlight. So it has, beside OUVC, it has the Innovation and Research Center. And also, this is very unique and innovative. They have a doctorate course on innovation management. And basically, this is pretty much it. So I think you could guess the idea. It is a very, very good school. And actually, with challenge-based learning, it prepares the students for global program, for the global reality. Let me put it that way. So so that was all about the university, and the only thing left is I just wanted to tell you how you can apply and what we are looking for as a VC. So the ticket size actually allows us to focus on very early stage ideas, but also work with more mature entrepreneurs and more mature projects as well. And when it comes to industries, we have a few preferred industries and also technologies. However, we've been pretty much looking for technologies that can help us. Help the world to be a better place in that sense, and also have the ecosystem as well. So these kind of investments we are looking for. When it comes to the preferred technologies, we have deep tech, machine learning, AI, robotics, and when it comes to industries, it's healthcare, sustainability, and industrial automation. And how can you apply? That's the last thing. So basically, you can apply on the website of OUVC. Let me talk more about the podcast. Sorry for the long intro.
Yeah,
but
that was interesting. I also learned something new. It's a quite future-oriented institution, I would say, more than a university and more than a VC. So let's go for it.
What do you think, Diana?
I had to Google the 10 billion Hungarian forints to figure out
how much real money is.
We're talking. It's quite substantial, actually. It's about 22 million pounds. So I think about 25 million euro, which is, pretty significant, I think, for, I guess Eastern Europe and what we're trying to achieve. So congratulations. And I was taking notes on everything you said, Greg. Really impressive.
Maybe it's a new collaboration. All right.
Yeah.
Cool. And let me just talk more about the podcast itself. So, we have this goal to help the ecosystem actually to develop and help you guys to write a good application when you're applying for funding. And so basically we want to educate the Hungarian ecosystem in general, so we try to bring in international expertise, network and know-how. And on this very, very podcast series, it's going to be, as I mentioned, the name is Failure and Success Stories. I'm going to touch upon a very stigmatized topic in the region, which is failure. I'm not too sure how do you guys feel, but I think in the region it's a quite, how can I say, we have a kind of attitude towards failure. It's like forbidden. You need to avoid that at all costs. And while in the US and also in the UK, failure is normal. It means you have experience, and it's not, the opposite of success, but rather the part of it. And basically, I would like to embrace it through this podcast. I would like to encourage you guys to not be afraid to fail. And if you fail, try to fail forward. Because at the end of the day, according to the statistics, in order to have a successful venture, you need to have 3.8 failed ones. And I think that's a very prudent statistic.
That's a conservative one.
A conservative one. Yeah, and basically this is it. So this is what we are going to talk about. And I grouped it in 3 topics. So we're gonna, when it comes to like the whole venture capital industry, we're always concerned with risk and returns. Obviously, we want high return, and also we would like to see some risk mitigation. And when it comes to risk, I can group this into 3 main categories. So execution risk, which is the theme. This is what we're going to talk about more or less today. The market, and also market risk, and also the product risk, whether you can build it or not. And I think we are ready to start with the introductions. So I mentioned your names already, but let me do it again. So I have Diana Florescu and Dr. Bence Spiczmüller here with me. I know both of them for several years, basically. And let's start with you, Diana. So you are one of the last people who comes into my mind when it comes to failures, because you are a UCL graduate, speak 3 languages fluently, ex-startup bootcamp, ex-rainmaking, shareholder at Wolf Summit, one of the biggest tech events in the region, and you are currently building a $100 million media for growth fund. So what can you say us on failures? Is everything rosy around you, or?
Thanks so much for having me. I think, behind every Forbes mention and all the fluent languages that I speak, I think there's a lot of like mispronounced words and rejected pitch sessions and attempts. So I think every accomplishment came with its own set of lessons, or some people like to call it failures. I think as you rightfully said, I think it's more about learning from, those failures. So I look back and I think they're all a set of lessons for me.
All right. And Bence, I always say that, entrepreneur's best friend is both the IT guys and the lawyers as well. So, and what is your point on failure from a legal point of view?
Yeah, first I need to note that when I heard the introduction of Diana, I thought that it will be a very, very short podcast session because we cannot have a conversation about failures. We would like to invent some hypothetical issues. And secondly, thank you for having me and thank you for the introduction. So I guess the entrepreneur's best friend is the lawyer and the IT guy. So the very best friend is the IT lawyer. Is that right? Yeah, I know that.
Finally, I could use these buttons.
Yeah, it's
so
good.
Very cool.
That's good. So, and back to the question. Yes, it's not a legal advice, but more than a general one. That and I'm just reflecting to Diana really that it's the question of the mindset. So if you consider failure something you need to avoid at all cost, that it will cost you a lot. But if you consider failures, it's a part of everyday life, and if you take into consideration what failure is inherently are, about what failures really are, then you can move forward and forward and forward, and this is the path of success at the end of the day. But of course, I advise a cautious approach, and there are legal tools not to avoid, but to mitigate these risks. And later on, I would like to talk about these instruments.
Actually, I brought you a red flag, so it's because we're talking about failures and important matters. Maybe you wanna let us know if we do something wrong.
Yeah. That's what clients always expect from me. That's waving red flags. So yeah, I'm used to it.
And a special button for you here, Diana. Unfortunately, you cannot hear it, but.
I'm just so gutted that I'm not with you guys, because I feel like you're having a lot of fun.
Yeah, we're having so much fun. Yeah, so just to add a few things. So in the US, they say failure is only a matter of time and perspective. And I think it's a very important thing. And basically what you said is like, how I see failure is like, if you fail once and if you can stand up, because failure is something, but how you behave, whether you take responsibility, that's another thing. And that's the more important lesson or takeaway from the failures. Like you need to have some responsibility. And basically if you fail a few times, with each failure, you're going to be in a better position compared to where you were before you failed. Okay, so Diana, just to make it very personal, I know that you had a fail. I didn't mention it, Forbes 30 under 30, UCL, whatever. I didn't mention it. I know that you had a failed venture. I will not name it because it would be a red flag.
So I'm useless, yes. Thank you. What a great task I have.
Yeah, but, we don't need to mention it. Just please talk about it in general terms, what was the problem there? What was the problem there?
Yeah, I think, first of all, Greg, I had many failures, not just one. But I think you're referring back to the attempt of building a venture studio. So I think the challenges, maybe, I think the challenges were twofold, right? So I know we're speaking about product and execution and team dynamics today. In fact, it was both for me, right? So there were executional problems and there were kind of team dynamic related problems. I think it's probably worth explaining what a startup studio does, because I think it's also the nature of the business that makes someone more susceptible to exploring optionality, and that can be actually very dangerous when you're lacking proper resources, be it capital or talent or time. Or at least what we were trying to build back then for us, a venture studio, it was the combination of having a build function with a source of capital. So you might think of it, more generally speaking, as a venture capital fund that actually builds companies. So as opposed to VCs, we were not looking just to invest in companies through our network of investors, but we were actually trying to conceive those ideas and test them and launch them to market. So we were spotting problems and jobs to be done, and then develop those ideas with startups. We had a corporate aspect to it as well, so we're trying to brainstorm potential ideas with larger corporations to solve those problems. And then the idea was to design the business model, recruit the teams, support those companies through our network of broader investors, and then launch them to market. So I think the executional part of this was extremely tricky. And now, retrospectively, it's much easier to spot those problems when you think back. Our business model, first of all, was just simply not adequate for the market. So we were trying to do this in Romania. And I think we were way ahead of the curve for that time. This was roughly 3 years ago. So I think just not being in the market at the right time and operating in essentially not the most adequate market. We also started out without any upfront working capital, which I think when I started defining a startup studio, I basically said it's a build function with a source of capital. So that kind of almost like set us for failure, because it was extremely difficult to operate lean and launch these ideas and support them with all the resources that they needed without ourselves as a company having that working capital. So if I were to build a startup studio again right now, I would go out and fundraise for sure. And now coming back to the second sort of set of challenges, it was a lot to do with founder dynamics, and I know we'll discuss that more throughout the podcast, but I think that's equally important to having that executional skill set, and most importantly, just having a mutually aligned vision on where you're trying to build. I think it may be that you and your founder don't always agree on certain business decisions, and that's absolutely fine. Or some of you may be going through, difficult personal times that may require the other to step in and kind of steer the ship. And that's absolutely fine. I think it's important that you talk about that. But the idea is that over the course of time, these sort of things balance each other out, right? But the problem, I think, arises when they don't. And, one is sort of like pushing things forward. The other one, it's sort of like more of a visionary type of person, and things don't start to align anymore. So we found ourselves, just to basically wrap up, we found ourselves kind of drawn to all sorts of new ideas, but before even fully validating what we started, right? So I think that's the danger of having so much optionality in your life. And that essentially just led to spreading ourselves too thin and having a lack of focus. So yeah, I think it was fault. Learned a lot from it, and look forward to speaking more about this actually throughout the podcast, and also speaking about what we can do, I guess, when you find yourself in those really tricky situations. And I'm looking forward to hearing from Bence on the legal side of things. I'm sure we'll touch on that too.
So Bence, can we?
Sure. Right. I liked how the way you put it, that your partner is more like a visionary type. That's a way to emphasize the real issue here. I would call them passive or passive aggressive partners usually. So, but I'm more harsh on that. Sorry. So I absolutely agree. And the general setting of the word is not that it's certain and it's safe. It's quite the contrary. It's very volatile and uncertain. And it is you are as well. We are all. We can change our minds. Sometimes we can be in a very tricky situation in our lives. So we are also kind of risk factors. And if you have it in your mind and initiate an honest discussion with your prospective business partner about it, then you can, as I said earlier, mitigate these issues. And there are two very basic and very important tools. The first is the term sheet, the so-called term sheet, which is not a legally binding document, but it's more like an indicative. What do you expect from each other, and what do you expect from the business? What do you expect from the future? And you really just brainstorm about it. It's a bit more than, it's a very deep brainstorming, but essentially at the end of the day, you will have the basic terms of a future agreement, which is called the syndicate agreement, or shareholders agreements, GV agreement, the joint venture agreement. The name doesn't matter. What matters is that you just bring everything on the table before going to the business and discuss the main issues. How will you really run the company? What will happen if something's changing? How to get rid of each other? How to sell your share? What is happening in a so-called deadlock situation, which is quite common actually. So if you cannot get a mutual understanding on an issue, and really how to handle it, because without it, you also somewhat protected because we have statute laws and legal. I see the Hungarian civil. I can cite the Hungarian civil law, the civil code, and of course UK has some basic methods how to solve these issues. But you are not in control. You are not in control. Without the shareholder agreement, you are jumping. You are doing a bungee jumping without a rope, really. So you can get lucky, but that's it. It's very hard. Thank you. So the key takeaway is that term sheet, honest discussion, and then a shareholders agreement, a draft shareholders agreement, which is a legally binding document, and it will solve not all, but the typical issues which may arise in the future. And there are experienced lawyers somewhere, and you can help you drafting these documents.
Just one very important thing from my side. So basically, I remember that the voting rights were a little bit misaligned in your case. And also, just tell my personal story with Bence actually, because we don't have it as yet, but.
I just tried. It's not a real abstract, but what are the voting rights? But probably some of the listeners are not familiar with it. So I just grabbed the opportunity to explain that the voting rights is if you're running a company together with the founder, then you have some kind of general meeting. You need to, from time to time, have this formal meeting and decide on the issues. And based on your percentage within the company, you have the voting rights. Which can be 50-50, which can be 60-40. So it really doesn't matter. If there are more of two, then you get the picture. But in the syndicate agreement, you can deviate from this percentage. So you can say that for some reserved matters, which are usually the most important matters in the company, it is needed you to have an anonymous vote, or let's say more than 80%, so majority vote within the company. So this is the issue of the voting rights.
Thank you. So say, for instance, if you join to a married couple, let's put it that way, or you don't have the syndicate agreement, then that can be very, very risky. And actually, I wanted to ask you, how shall we protect ourselves? You pretty much answered the question. When it comes to the team dynamics, because for me, when I had my own business, I had also a big failure. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't call it a failure, but I had to close a company. It was a passion project, and we just couldn't get on well with the partner. A passive aggressive or sociopath or
a visionary. Yeah, visionary. It's much better. I have to admit it's much better.
Yeah, I don't roast anybody, but yeah, it was a very, very bad experience, and it really, really mattered a lot for me. And let's as I brought this up, like how you could felt some negativity from me probably, and I just wanted to ask you, Diana, like, how did you cope with it? Like, did it have any effect on your mental or physical health, or how did you feel? Because it can be like really, really nerve-wracking.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I do have actually a question for Bence before answering yours, Greg, which is you touched on the 50-50 split, and I think a lot of us, especially when you get into a venture with somebody. Which, by the way, I would probably advise against doing it with your friends or family. But it's quite uncomfortable, right, to discuss things like how the partnership can be terminated, or things that may be probably a bit uncomfortable at the start when everything is rosy, as Greg was putting it at the start. And I think a lot of founders in that moment, especially if you don't start with any working capital, you have a tendency to split the business 50-50. Yeah. Is that something that you advise, or what would be your advice? Because I think most of the time that's where things get really stuck if you don't bring maybe an external advisor.
Absolutely. That is something I especially advise against. So no, the 50-50 is legally the riskiest option. Even let's just within the context of Hungarian law, you cannot exclude your partner if something goes wrong because you have no power over him. He or she has no power over you, so it's absolutely, the deadlock is almost always inevitable, and a very high level of maturity is needed from both parties to settle such issues, and you are facing your partner always in every general meeting, and it can be easily become a chess game, or even worse, a boxing competition. And it's harder to get rid of your 50% business partner than your spouse, believe me, strictly legally speaking. So, well, of course, a divorce is very hard, and I don't want to, break every, hearts. And I know it's hard, but trust me, get rid of your 50% business partner is even harder.
Yeah. I mean, I can totally relate, and I think nobody wants to start a relationship thinking that it's going to end badly. But I think you have to discuss these things. I think going back to your point, Greg. I mean, it's very difficult. Obviously, it can have a massive toll on you, mentally, physically as well. Obviously, you feel like you have to move on, but at the same time, you're stuck. I mean, for me personally, as I was coming out of the venture, that specific example, I was starting something else. I think it's difficult to find time to pause and reflect on what just happened when you're also like in the middle of starting something new, and sometimes that could be detrimental to the new venture as well, because you don't give yourself enough space, to contextualize what just happened. And I think it's even more difficult when you have obviously a good relationship with your business partner, or previously you had. That's what I meant by, I guess, be careful. And I think you had an interesting point you wanted to raise later about what's more dangerous, being in business with someone that it's perhaps unskilled, or someone that, your personality clashes with them. I think we had a great run, together. I think that's sometimes even more upsetting when you stop seeing eye to eye. So it has a toll on you mentally as well, and implicitly physical. But I'm curious to hear your opinion, guys, and how you dealt with your situation.
Actually, I just have a follow-up question on that, because we talk a lot about the partners, but I forgot to mention it at the beginning of the podcast. Like, I mentioned that how we group risks, and we're gonna have sessions on the different risk categories. But I'm gonna have an extra one, like, why
more risks. Come on.
Why your investor partners want you to fail, and that's a valid one, because I think we all been in a situation. We all saw that when an investor comes in and suddenly just realize that.
I don't think that investors want you to fail. They just want to gain more without you.
Perfect one for that. Well, you couldn't hear it, but exactly. So, and that's a failure on your side. So yeah, what do you guys think about this?
I agree with Bence. I mean, I don't think, realistically speaking, no investor would like to set you up for failure, right? If you invested in the company. But I think indirectly that could happen depending on the type of investor, right? If your agreement at the beginning was that they would not only necessarily contribute with cash, but there are a lot of strategic investors, a lot of active investors, and then they take a very passive kind of position in the company, that could set you up for failure. So it's not, that they do want you to fail, but I think through their certain defaults, either on payments or simply just not supporting as per the original agreement, then it could obviously impact the performance of the company and yourself as well.
And what do you guys think? So we all know what we should do, and even if we don't know, we can find somebody called a lawyer who probably knows. I hope you're not paying for this, by the way.
Well, I don't know. I can always issue an invoice.
Yeah, so we know what we should do, but for some reason, I just recently opened, another venture with a very good friend of mine, and the chemistry is so good that
That's a red.
That's a red flag.
We didn't have this agreement. Straight away after my previous one, I just opened a new one, and we still don't have a series, the term sheet or a syndicate agreement or whatsoever. And
great, amazing, wow.
So, and I think it's a very common case, and somehow we do not have the talk with our partners. Why we don't have it?
Because you would like to.
It's uncomfortable.
Please continue.
No, it is usually it's a very uncomfortable kind of conversation. But I actually feel, I don't know if you feel the same, Bence and Greg, but times have changed a lot in the last decade, even in Central and Eastern Europe. I think a lot of the founders that I meet these days, they are properly equipped with some basic legal understanding and what papers they have to sign. And I couldn't agree more with Bence. I mean, the shareholder agreement, of course, but things like a vesting schedule, right? And I think that should be in place. And there's discussing, and again, I think when I said it's uncomfortable, is because you literally sit down and go through points of okay, how are we going to terminate the company if that happens, and how a partner can maybe buy his or her shares of the partnership, and having a proper description of management powers and duties of each partner, or dealing with ownership and distribution of losses and profits, etc. Right? I think everyone in any relationship of any kind, you don't want to think about how it's going to end. But I think that's really the conversation that, in fact, we should be having.
Absolutely, and my experience is somewhat similar. Then, having the talk in the beginning about failures, it's something you cannot avoid anymore. So it's there, it's on the table, and it's time consuming, it's resource consuming, and it's mentally challenging for some people. And the mindset is, okay, maybe in the future, if and there's a big if, there will be some trouble, there will be some issue, we can solve it. We can solve it because we love each other. We know each other from years. We are good partners. And of course we can solve every issue, but I don't want to think about it. Thinking about it and paying for the lawyer to solve these issues we currently not have, it seems irrational. And that's why some people avoid the talk.
Yeah, I agree. But would it be a solution if I would just, approach a lawyer and say okay, it's not from me, but I've been there. So let's just hire a lawyer independently and ask her or him to draft up these agreements that protects both of us without our,
But how? So from the lawyer's perspective, okay, what are the issues? What about the company? So you need to have a talk. It's not between us. Then it's between us and the lawyer, but it's still the talk. And you are paying the lawyer instantly with his or her legal fees. And then they have the first issue: who pays the lawyer?
Both of us.
Yeah, of course.
I was about to say, no offense, but there's so many platforms nowadays where you can just go and draft up your shareholders agreement and your vesting schedule, and you know what I mean.
No. So don't mention. There are some, but they are not reliable, right? Sorry, please.
Well, you made a good point. I think when you get started on the hierarchy of needs, I don't know if you feel the same, but I feel like the legal aspect and then perhaps branding and everything, they're sort of left till the end. I think especially in Eastern Europe, we have a mindset of build.
Yes.
That's why if you look at actually across Europe, I think 80% of European unicorns are SaaS businesses. And obviously there is a reason for that, because there are asset lean companies, relatively easy to execute, low resources, and everything has been built with the idea of having a quick exit, moving on, etc. So we're just right now creating the first kind of community of serial founders that would go back and reinvest in the region. And that, I think, like this kind of aspects are sort of like deprioritized. And that's, I guess, the reason we're having this conversation. We should talk more about it.
Sure.
Yeah, and also just wanted to ask you, like, you probably encountered many startups, like I know you did. So, and then you, maybe not just startups, but SMEs as well. Like, I assume that you saw some big, memorable failures. Can you maybe share some stories, funny stories maybe, or it's not funny at all, you know?
I mean, probably without names, of course. I could try. Well, the true horror story is, for me was with an SME. It was not almost a startup. It was very active in the health sector and in diagnostics, and the situation was the 50-50. So two foreigner, they know each other since high school, and they both came to Hungary and started a great business, and it went well. But something, I'm not quite sure what happened with one of the guys, and what he did is he forged. So it was a criminal act, forged company documents and increased the capital in the company. So he became, upon the forged document, a majority holder in the company, and then he acted as, a majority holder of the company and started managing the company until bankruptcy. So with great management skills.
We saw something similar with Diana, I guess.
Yeah, so that and it was very hard, to prove first that there were forgery, and second, to remedy the situation based on company law. And at the end of the day, you still cannot rid off your 50% partner, because the remedy was what? The remedy was to reduce, the majority share back to 50 for the original standpoint. But you still have a partner. You cannot do anything, and he can still vote against you, veto everything, even from the jail. So that's very hard, and it's true horror story. It's quite rare. It's only one occasion, but it happened. I just wanted to mention it, so it is always a possibility.
And what happened after?
It's ongoing.
All right. How about you, Diane?
I think this is actually about how long these things may take, right? Honestly, put me on the spot. I know a lot of examples of companies that folded, but not necessarily for legal reasons. I think most of the time it's either just running out of capital. I obviously work a lot with consumer businesses, so usually it's lack of access to capital, or not having the right resources at a point of scaling, which essentially that's we're also trying to achieve with starting a media capital fund. But I guess probably a very famous story that I'm sure a lot of people listening would remember. It's the Theranos case, right? In the States, that's unfortunately it imploded. And there's been many other ventures, that had ups and downs, and a lot of, forged documents, as Bence was saying. So, but I think the Theranos story, it's definitely, I would actually encourage a lot of founders to watch that, or a lot of aspirational founders, I suppose. And there is an interesting Netflix show on the story of Theranos.
As I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, some people say that failure is only a matter of time and perspective. So do you guys agree with that?
Yeah,
absolutely.
And Diana as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, again, you put it rightfully at the start of the conversation. It's you can't avoid it. And the problem is that the way we relate to failure, perhaps, back home, it's just simply wrong. Because I just think that it's just a lesson. And failure can be small or big, right? It doesn't have to be that you fold a company to call it failure. It can be, I don't know, just missing an important milestone or not having the right people, etc. So I think it's absolutely impossible to avoid it during the course of time. It's just...
What would be the most important advice that you would give to a newbie, an entrepreneur, a first-time entrepreneur? That's my last question for both of you, by the way.
I think what I'm about to say is probably somehow opposed to the kind of ubiquitous investment principle of diversifying portfolios and hedging bets, etc. But one thing that really made me a lot happier in my work life, and I think my personal life as well, is just removing optionality and increasing conviction on one or two projects, or ideally one project, right? And I think that could in fact lead to more success and also a happier life. So the advice I would give is to try to prioritize and validate one idea at a time, and put aside enough time to speak to your founders or with your team. If you're a solo founder, you may have a team, or you may have investors, which you also have to, respond to. Spending enough time with people and understanding, their life and their personality, and having more personal conversations, especially before going to business with somebody. Yeah. I think that's what I would give myself, that advice, if I were to start again.
Yeah, actually, this is the main advice. So I try to create a catchphrase. I hope you would like it. So my advice would be, don't let your venture become an adventure.
That's a cool one.
Thank you. And the basics behind, we talked about it, that you are responsible for yourself. If you have a partner, you are responsible for your partner, and together you are responsible your venture, the venture responsible for clients. So have it in your mind and act accordingly.
Perfect ending. Thank you very much, guys. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this very first session of the OUVC Failure and Success Stories. Stay tuned for the next one. Please follow us on social media, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. Check our website. And thank you very much for both of you to participate. And I hope everyone could learn a lot. And as they say at Star Trek, live long and prosper. We see each other very soon. Thank you.